Greetings, everyone joining. We will be starting in 1 minute. Thank you for your patience. Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight with our Citywide Council for District 75's outreach program. We will be starting this meeting at 6:05 p.m. With that being said, we are going to be talking about modeling frustration tolerance and calming techniques. We have YAI licensed clinical social worker Chelsea Shepard, who will be presenting to us today. At this moment, we do have interpretation also, so I would like to give the floor to them to give your instructions. Spanish, you may begin.
Buenas tardes todos y bienvenidos a esta reunión. Le brindamos servicios de interpretación simultánea. Si quisieran escuchar esta presentación, esta reunión y participar en español, por favor marquen en su teléfono el número 347-966-4114 y el código de entrada que es el 228-197-881 y el signo numeral. Repito, marquen el 347-966-4114 y el código que es el 228-197-881 y el signo numeral. Por favor, mantengan sus micrófonos cerrados para evitar ruido al fondo. Gracias.
Thank you so much. Mandarin, you may give your instructions.
今天的会议会有提供国语的翻译服务，请各位家长拨打电话347-966-4114，然后密码是513-203-992，然后我现在再重复一次，今天我们的会议有提供国语的翻译服务，请你拨打电话347-966-4114。然后密码是513-203-992，谢谢。I finished my announcement. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bangla, you may give your instructions.
Hi, this is the interpreter QA. Actually, we only have Mandarin and Spanish for this meeting.
Thank you so very much. I'm so used to having that third language. So with that being said, we will now hand the floor over to Ms. Chelsea Shepard from YAI. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Chelsea, you have the floor.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. My name is Chelsea Shepard. Thanks for the introduction. I'm the clinical director for YAI's New York START Region 4 Tri-Borough team. It's a mouthful. I'm a licensed clinical social worker with expertise in people with intellectual disabilities and mental health disorders. I also work as clinical faculty on the SUNY Downstate LEND program. Should I pause for translation or?
Let's check in. How are we doing in the interpretation rooms?
You're doing good. Slowing down is always good. Thank you.
So this is the interpreter QA. Actually, this is for simultaneous interpretation. So the interpreters already are aware that you can go on for the entirety of the meeting and they will be interpreting at the same time.
Okay, got it. Thank you. You guys are amazing. By way of introduction, START is an evidence-informed model of crisis prevention and response for people with neurodevelopmental disabilities and complex behavioral needs. We emphasize trauma-informed care and positive psychology approaches, and emphasize understanding the whole person as more than just a set of symptoms or behaviors. START is a national leading expert in the field of intellectual disabilities. A key mission of ours is to share this knowledge set and to enhance the capacity of the community, especially parents, to support people in this unique population. And I'm very happy to be a guest with all of you tonight and to share some of START's principles and insight. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to talk today about calming techniques for the whole family. All right, so bear with me.
If I may interrupt momentarily, I forgot to actually announce this meeting is being live streamed on YouTube and will be recorded. Thank you.
All right, here we go. Calming techniques for the whole family. And first we're kind of going to talk about why it's so important for everybody to be doing the same thing. Everyone faces hardship in their life, right? No matter how much money you do or don't have, no matter where you come from in life, nobody's life is always easy all the time. Some people face more challenges than others, right? Hardship becomes trauma when we really can't move forward, when we're stuck kind of seeing our present life through the lens of something bad that happened to us. But not everybody who's experienced hardship is experiencing trauma. But that doesn't mean that hardship doesn't shape our lives, right? We all see the world through the lens of what we've experienced and what we've learned in our own lives. And our kids learn resilience from us. Resilience is the ability to kind of look at how we're feeling and recognize how our past experiences may have affected us. For example, I didn't grow up with very much money myself. And I wouldn't say that this was a trauma, but it was really hard for me growing up, not being able to buy my own clothes. All my clothes were hand-me-downs. And, in the grand scheme of things, that's not that bad. But when you're 12 years old, you want to be able to go to the mall and purchase clothes like your friends have. And now that I have a daughter, all I want to do is buy her too many clothes. And that's not helpful, right? It's just me trying to overcorrect for something that's happened to me. So it's really important for us to try to sit back and reflect as to why we do the things that we do, even if, maybe it's a good thing. But we always want to try to do our best to be self-aware. And the biggest time that this comes into place is when we are stressed out, right? Raising a child with a disability is extremely stressful. Raising any kid is stressful. But it's really hard to deal with all these medical appointments, navigating the system to try to make sure that they get the right services. And, sometimes we really need to be in a place at a time, and our kids aren't able to do it. They might say no, they might not want to get dressed. They might not want to go to the appointment. They may not put on their shoes. They might just lay down on the floor and scream. There's nothing more stressful as a parent than seeing your child in distress. But the way that we handle those stressful moments teaches our kids how to handle their own stressful moments. We can tell them, I need you to do this. I want you to calm down. But kids are sponges. They're going to see what we do when we are stressed, and they are going to do the same thing. So if we cope with stress by yelling and losing our temper, then our kids are going to probably do the same thing. And that's not to say that we should be perfect. Nobody's perfect, and no parent is going to be perfect. But after we make mistakes, we want to model both recognizing that it was a mistake and forgiving ourselves. Because if our kids don't see us forgive ourselves, then they're not going to forgive themselves for having a bad day. That's why, when we talk about anybody in a family unit trying to be calm, it really needs to be done by absolutely everyone, ideally. Some of us, myself included, live in multi-generational families. As adults and as parents, we can't control our own parents. We maybe can't control our partner. But in an ideal world, everybody is going to be on board supporting stress management in the same way. I don't know if you guys grew up hearing some version of do as I say, not as I do. But it doesn't work, right? Our kids are too smart for that. Even if they have an intellectual disability or autism, they know that if we do it, then they have permission to do it. So we have to do our best to demonstrate calmness and demonstrate that we can apologize when we are wrong. And I think it's really important too to remember, and I should change this, it's not just our kids. We are all doing the best that we can, even when it doesn't seem like it, right? We all have bad days, and our kids have bad days. Today might be a tough day because somebody didn't sleep well. Somebody has a stomach ache or a headache. Something happened at school, or for us, something happened at work or within our day, or something's been on your mind. So just because yesterday we were able to get up and get to where we needed to be without any issues, there's all these reasons why today we might not be able to. And it's not because we're being defiant, right? Just like adults. Some days I have so much energy to do my laundry, get all my work done, make dinner from scratch, clean the dishes. And some days I don't do anything and the house is a mess and I'm really tired and I try to go to bed early. That's not because that day I don't care, right? It's because sometimes we have the energy to do everything that we need to do and to behave the way that we need to behave. And sometimes we don't. And that's part of life for everybody. And I'm about to review some tools that everyone in the family can and should use when they're feeling frustrated. But I want to really emphasize that the time to practice these skills is not during a crisis. If you have a child who is upset, maybe they lay down on the floor, maybe they're yelling, maybe they're telling you, no, I'm not going to do that. That is not the time to introduce something like deep breathing. It's really good to do this kind of thing for a minute or two every day. You could try at bedtime or at dinner time, but practice makes perfect. And so you want to make sure that you're practicing so that when you're in a moment of stress, when it's much harder to do things than normal, right? That you already have been practicing these skills. And we don't just want people to listen and obey, right? We want people to actually feel better. So that is the goal of these activities, is not to get people to be obedient, but it is to help our kids and ourselves feel better so that we are more able to do the things that we need to do. So this is two otters. When otters sleep, they hold on to each other to float down the river. And that is really how a family unit works. None of us can function without the other. We're interconnected. So this is the most important coping mechanism or coping skill that exists. It actually affects us physiologically. So I don't know if you've noticed this when you're stressed out or you're feeling angry, but you really feel it in your body. Different people feel, different things to some degree. Maybe you feel hot. Maybe your heart is beating faster. Some people, it actually affects their ability to breathe properly. That's because when we're angry, our brain actually thinks that we're in danger. When we deep breathe, we are calming our bodies and teaching our brain that we are not in danger. It decreases the flow of cortisol into our brain, and it physiologically soothes us. I know, when my daughter is having a tantrum, I get really discombobulated. If I yell at her, it's just going to make things worse. So it's really important that I show her what calmness is. And in turn, I'm helping myself. I had a job a few years back as a therapist in a pediatrician's office. And I spent all day teaching deep breathing to the kids. And I've never felt more calm in my life because I was spending all day showing other people how to deep breathe. So it was actually really beneficial, not just for my patients, but for me. So I highly recommend deep breathing. If you take your kids to school or have some kind of commute, just spending a couple minutes. It's not an exact art, but there are a couple of elements of deep breathing that are very important. You want to breathe in through your nose, take a pause, and breathe out through your mouth. And the reason for this is we don't want to hyperventilate and get too much oxygen in our brain. So the way that I help kids, especially, very literal thinkers or kids who need a lot of support, how to do this is I bring it back to things that they already do. So you're going to start out by smelling the flower. Hold for 2. Blow out the candles of a cake. And if you see, your kid is breathing in too fast, see that all the time, actually. Oh, I think is someone asking a question? Okay, I think they're muted now. If you see somebody breathing in too fast, I see this a lot. That's not going to help somebody calm down. It might actually, again, be too much oxygen to your brain. So that's not how we smell a flower, though, right? When we smell a flower, we go and otherwise we're not going to get the fragrance in our nose. And same with blowing out. If you see somebody blowing too quickly, you're getting spit on the cake, so we really have to. For some people, the exact number count is helpful. It's an estimate. You don't have to count. But the main point is that you should breathe in. You should hold very briefly. We don't need anyone passing out. And then blow out a little bit longer than how long you were breathing in for. So I'm going to do one more because I find it very soothing. If you practice this after dinner every day for 30 seconds to a minute, that's going to set a routine of calmness for the family. And again, it's not just a child who may have crises or have tantrums. It's for yourself too, because again, being a parent is incredibly stressful, and we need to take that time to soothe ourselves so that we can help the rest of our family. This is another one. It's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 game. This is really useful when you or your child or your friend or your mother is feeling stressed about something. When we're feeling stressed, most likely we're either really focusing on something that already happened that's upsetting us, or we're thinking a lot about something that's in the future that's scaring us or making us nervous. Yes, we have to process our past, and yes, we have to plan for the future, but being really stressed and anxious doesn't help anybody. It's not a practical way to get things done. So this is a good way for us to bring ourselves back to the present. It's called a grounding technique, and the idea is to anchor yourself back in your body so that you're not trapped in the past or the future, but you're in the present. So you want to look at 5 things you can see. It's hard to play this game in a gray office, but you know, pretty much anywhere else, there's 5 things that you can see. And you can play this out loud with your child when they're in crisis. Or you can even do this yourself when, again, maybe things are getting out of control and they're in crisis and they're not ready to do a grounding technique, but you need to bring yourself back in first. So you look around the room and you can name it again out loud, or if it's for yourself in your head, what are 5 things that you see? What are 4 things that you can touch? And that doesn't mean that you have to go around touching things. That's not always appropriate. But if you're sitting in your chair, you can touch your finger to your other finger. You can touch your fingers to your hair. You can touch your fingers to your shirt. And you can touch your fingers to your chair. That's 4 things right there. And again, it can always be those same 4 things. You just are bringing awareness into your body and bringing yourself back into the present moment. You want to think about 3 things you can hear. Sometimes, yes, that will be a child yelling, but that's okay. Again, we're not trying to change anything. We can't change the present, but we're just trying to make ourselves more in the moment. 2 things that you can smell. And 1 thing you can taste. I realize that the taste one we can't always do, but you know, if you have some gum or some Altoids or some kind of, you know, kids with autism sometimes do well with those sensory mouth toys, so that you could do as well instead of taste. Walking mindfully. And this is one that's more so for ourselves or for older kids, but you can really do this with anyone. The goal of walking mindfully is kind of to combine those first 2 coping techniques. We want to bring ourselves back into the moment. Going for a walk is really good for you in general. But the danger of going for a walk is sometimes it gives us an opportunity to think too much about all the things that are worrying us. So that kind of negates the benefits of getting the physical exercise. So when we walk mindfully, we're actually controlling our thoughts a little bit. So you can actually play the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 game on a walk. But Otherwise, what you want to do is you want to go for a walk and be really aware of the elements and how they're impacting your body. How does it feel when you take each step? How does it feel on your foot? How does it feel on your leg? Be really aware. Are your arms swinging back and forth? Is it hot out or cold out? Take a moment to think about, how does the air feel on your skin? Is it windy? Is it drizzling? It's been really hot out. Are you sweating? And then what do you see? Ideally, you would do this maybe near a park or, there's some really nice parks throughout the city, somewhere where you can look and see just a little bit of nature. I know it can be tough. But what are you seeing? Are you seeing some beautiful buildings? Are you seeing flowers? Are you seeing trees? How does the sky look? What do the clouds look like today? Is it foggy? And then what do you hear? Again, it's New York City. It might be construction noises. But again, the goal is to bring yourself into the present moment. If you're thinking too much about the future or thinking too much about the past, that's going to affect our ability to be present in the moment and be calm. So the goal here is just to get yourself back into that present moment. Develop a mantra. It's funny because when I was in grad school, somebody suggested that we develop a mantra to get us through. And I rolled my eyes. I thought that was so corny. But I did it because it was part of my class and I had to. And that mantra, I ended up using it every single day and it got me through school. And now whenever I'm having a tough time, I always develop a mantra. And the reason for that is, I think that whenever we're stressed out, we're going to have some negative self-talk, right? If we're really frustrated because our kids aren't doing well, we're going to have those self-doubt, right? We're going to think, I'm not a good mom. I'm not a good dad. If I were better, maybe my kid would be doing better. What could I have done differently? And the truth is, again, we're all doing the best that we can on any given day. And we have to show ourselves a little bit of grace. There's no one size fits all for a mantra, right? It has to be something that works for you. And it has to really pertain to whatever it is that you're going through, whether it's parenting, whether maybe you're having health concerns in your family, maybe, someone's getting divorced, or your kids are having a hard time with school, or they're being bullied. You want it to be as short and as simple as possible. It can be prayerful if you're religious. It can be general if you just need help getting through the day. One that I like to use a lot when parents are getting divorced or separated is 2 homes, 1 heart. I think it's really hard for kids and it's really hard on the parents. Maybe the divorce or the separation is the right choice for the family, and that's okay. But I think there's a lot of guilt and shame sometimes when parents separate. So it's important, again, for us to forgive ourselves because we want our kids to forgive themselves and we want to model that. And this one I realize is a little more advanced, but you can find things like this on YouTube. Some people love deep breathing. I am one of those people. Just deep breathing by itself, I can sit and clear my mind. You know, one thing that I've learned a lot in my career and as a parent is no matter how chaotic things are, we always have 1 minute. Sometimes I will just go in the bathroom and set a timer so that I don't have to be checking the clock. And I close my eyes and for a whole minute, and I feel better. For some people, deep breathing doesn't take their mind off of a situation by itself. You should pair deep breathing with grounding techniques because, again, it is a physiological reaction that your body has to deep breathing. So these other, meditation techniques are not going to be so effective without deep breathing. But you can pair it with either a guided meditation. Sometimes it's just envisioning your favorite place. Maybe it's somewhere from your childhood or a trip you've been on or somewhere that you've always wanted to go and you're imagining it. You can pair deep breathing with a prayer. You can pair deep breathing with a wish and a mantra, telling yourself, I will get through this. So you can really pair deep breathing with anything. A really effective, but again, somewhat more complicated way to pair deep breathing is through these grounding techniques. I do recommend looking on the internet. There's infinite free, helpful ways of doing this. But essentially what you want to do is you want to sit in your chair, and it's kind of hard to demonstrate over Zoom, but similar to the mindfulness walks, you just want to start to be very aware of your body. How is your body sitting in the chair? How are your feet touching the ground? Be aware of your head. It should be floaty. Your shoulders should be relaxed. Your palms should be facing up to channel openness. And we can deep breathe like this. Pairing this with soothing music can be very helpful. Again, it can be music of choice. It can be spiritual music, or, if you Google meditation music, a million things come up. But when we learn how to do this for ourselves, we can teach our kids to do it. If we don't know how to do it and they're in crisis and we say, okay, try your calming techniques, it's not going to happen. We need to show them that we know how to face adversity and calm our emotions and our anger and our sadness. That's the only way that they're going to learn how to do it too. And, I wanted to give a note on something called radical acceptance. This is a component of something called dialectical behavioral therapy, but it really helps everybody. And the idea behind radical acceptance is that sometimes things happen. Tantrums happen, right? I'm dealing with that right now myself. Sometimes we get stuck in traffic, or if you take the subway, another issue is the subway is always delayed, right? Sometimes we're running late and we're going to be late. Or we have to wait for a really long time in a doctor's office. And some of these things are just outside of our control, right? If I could make the subway be on time, I would be a billionaire. being on the subway and getting really, really angry because it's stuck for the millionth time isn't going to make us get to where we need to be any faster. And it is frustrating, right? We all get frustrated. It's terrible. But sitting there stewing in our anger isn't going to help. So when we radically accept things, it's our ability to have that internal dialogue and say to ourselves, this is terrible. I wish this weren't happening. There's nothing I can do about it. And when we recognize that is the situation, that is the time that we need to do a calming technique. Because at this point, all we can do is try to self-soothe. And that's not true for every problem we have, right? There's a lot of problems that have a solution, and we can strategize. If we're hungry, we can make a meal or help a family member make a meal. If we have a lot of stuff coming up at work, we can make a to-do list and strategize about how to get everything done. So this is really for the things that we just cannot change, right? Our kids can't radically accept. They're not old enough. You know, some of you have children with ADHD or autism or an intellectual disability or some other kind of extra additional challenge. But even neurotypical kids, they can't radically accept. So we have to model this for them. If we're in a doctor's office and there's a really long wait and our kid has autism, they are probably going to get frustrated, right? It's frustrating. And they might even go into crisis. They might start yelling. They might start headbanging. They're not old enough to have the capacity to have that internal dialogue where they say, this is a real bummer. I really hate that I have to wait for a long time, but there's nothing that I can do about it. So I'm going to deep breathe to feel better. They can't do that, but we can. And the way that they learn how to do this is by seeing us do it. And so we can demonstrate to them out loud. We can say, I know you're upset. This is really frustrating. We're all frustrated. I wish I could change it, but I can't. So I'm going to deep breathe. If you go and try that tomorrow, is it going to magically change who your child is and make them, cope with stress better? Probably not. But over time, they're going to learn from us. And we are going to feel better because we are helping ourselves too. So after a crisis, and this again is for our children, for our mothers, for our fathers, for our siblings, and for ourselves, it's really important to process, especially with a spouse or your children. So how do we process? Name emotions. And how I might do this for myself is going to be different for how I might do this with a young child, especially one with some neurodevelopmental differences. But we can talk about what was I feeling. Some kids, they're only going to be able to name 3 feelings: happy, sad, mad. And that's okay. I've worked with a lot of kids who had pretty serious crises. And then they came to me later when they were feeling better and they said, Miss Chelsea, I was sad and mad. That's huge. The fact that they can look back and recognize that they were upset is wonderful. I do this for myself also. If I get frustrated with someone or with my daughter, I look back and I think I was feeling really angry. And then we want to think about why. Was I angry because I'm really tired and stressed out at work? Sometimes we're stressed about money. Sometimes we're stressed about our relationships. Sometimes we were just hungry. But it's important for us to think back about why. And it's important for our kids too. What was making you so upset? And again, this conversation with a child is going to be very different. They might not be able to tell you why, and that's okay. But that you're having the conversation is teaching them to think about it in the future. And then talk about the what. What can happen next time? Next time I get frustrated as a parent, if it's because I was hungry, maybe I should eat a bigger lunch. If it's because I was tired, I can't always just take a nap, but I can try to go to bed earlier, or at least just be aware that I'm tired, and that's going to make me more susceptible to being angry. If I'm angry because of a situation, is there something that I can do to change that? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, right? We can change some things and some things we can't. If it's something that I can change, I'm probably going to want to strategize. What can I do differently? If it's something that I can't change, I'm going to practice radical acceptance. If we have a child and again, they go into crisis because we're in the doctor and the wait is too long, even if they're able to process, right, they're going to really need our help. We're going to need to help them say, okay, I was mad. I was frustrated because I didn't want to have to wait. I was bored. The chairs weren't comfortable. It was stuffy in the room. What can happen next time? That kind of depends, right, on what helps your child and this particular situation. But are there any additional tools that you can use to help making this wait less terrible? I'm someone who's not a big fan of screen time, but in a situation like this, that's probably an appropriate use of screen time. Can we bring sensory toys? Can we offer water and bring snacks? So we always want to try to process after a crisis. Again, whether it's for ourselves or for our families. And that concludes my training.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. This has been really, really amazing information. So what I will do is jump straight over to our parents and family members that are in the chat so that we can take any questions that you have. You can either put them in the chat or you can raise your hand to be recognized. Or just unmute. I do have a question while we wait to see if any other parents have questions. Oh, wait, Joanne Snyder, you may have the floor. You can unmute.
Thank you. I was just wondering, my son has autism, ADD, anxiety, and he's going into actually 12th grade. Do you have anything you would advise for older kids, or is it for all ages?
This is for all ages. I think you bring up a good point that I meant to touch on a little bit is teenagers. It doesn't matter if you have autism, if you have ADHD, if you have an intellectual disability or Down syndrome. Teenagers are teenagers. Teenagers are frustrating for adults a lot of the time, and for parents especially. Part of being a teenager is separating from your parents and really figuring out who you are as an individual. And that's why we end up fighting so much with teenagers, because we say go left and they go right. that doesn't mean that they're not hearing you. We might not see it right away, but they are still absorbing everything that they see you do and everything that we suggest. It just takes time. And if we say it in a way where we are respecting, and I'm sure you do, right? In a way that we are respecting their autonomy while also trying to guide them, because they're not adults yet. They, might need additional support forever. I don't know your son. But he's still becoming more independent. So I would continue the course. Tell him that you really want to work with him and partner him. But these techniques are going to be helpful for him too. And you might suggest them and he's going to say, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do that. I'm going to do my own thing. But if he sees you using these techniques, then maybe when you're not there and you're not looking, he might try it.
And will those slides be sent to us?
Yeah, I can show them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chelsea. We have an additional question that came in.
Mhm.
Do you have experience with nonverbal children? And do you think there is anything different you might do to help them regulate?
That's a wonderful question. I do have experience with nonverbal children. For nonverbal children, every person is unique, right? So some kids who are nonverbal or limited verbal skills, they still understand what's being said to them. And some people need a lot of support, both understanding language and using language. But no matter what, I would model by demonstrating. Kids who have less use of language need even more visual support. So if we want them to deep breathe, I would actually, it's hard to show again here, but I would really show them with exaggerated motions. For the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 game, I might really focus on things that you can see and point. Things that you can touch and maybe touch things with them with their hands. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 game you might not use if somebody is really in crisis, but you can use it when you see that somebody is starting to amp up. We want to catch it before it really, and you can't always, but before it really peaks over. For guided meditation, you can really do the same thing. I would and talk about in very simple language, a happy memory that you have together. Remember that time we went to the beach, the sand was nice, the beach was nice, much more simple language, but you can talk about, you want to get their mind into a happy space.
I don't see any other questions in the chat. I do have one. When you talk about modeling and practicing and things of that nature, my son is one. He has ADHD. He has oppositional defiant disorder. So there's a lot of different things. Just even with that, like I found I have my own sensory issues that may be triggered by his. So as we practice, do you have any, how should we practice? Like just in the moment when we catch it with ourselves, or is it something that we should try daily with our children, or when they're in that actual moment, do it?
Just like for them, asking them to deep breathe in a crisis without practicing is probably not going to be that effective. It's probably not going to be that effective for us either. So when we want to practice these skills ourselves, and I think that everyone in the world would be better off if we use these skills, we want to practice every day. And I would pick the same time, whether that's bedtime, whether that's breakfast, probably the morning we're trying to get out the door. So I would really do it sometime in the evening. You can do it before dinner when you sit down for dinner or after dinner. But just 1 or 2 minutes. You don't need to drag it out and just, but once we start practicing it more, the more we use it ourselves, and I say this because I teach these skills a lot, and the more I teach them as a therapist and as a social worker, the more I use them. So I'm using these skills every single day myself, and it makes you feel calmer and it helps you tolerate all kinds of stress.
Well, thank you so much, Chelsea. I don't see any other questions in the chat, but I do want to say that on our YouTube CCD 75 outreach, we do have relaxing music, mantras, guided meditations, and things of that nature. If parents do feel that they need another level of support, we do have a guided playlist there. I want to check in now with our interpreters. Do we have any questions in the Spanish Mandarin room?
No questions in
For
Spanish group.
Mandarin, we don't hear any Mandarin. We don't have any questions. Chen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I just want to let you guys know, we will also, we'll shoot this out with the PDF to everyone who has registered, just in case some people were not available to make it to the meeting. I will also put
sorry, I think there's one last question that
I do
just
see,
came in.
yes. Do you think entering puberty escalates this?
Definitely. When you enter puberty, there's so much going on, right? I think we talked in the beginning about when you don't feel good in your body, you're not going to have such a good day. When you enter puberty, you aren't feeling good in your body for a couple of years. And that's also the beginning of the storm of adolescence. So entering puberty absolutely is one of the most challenging times in all of our lives. And especially for a kid who's neurodivergent. That doesn't mean that you won't get through it. This too shall pass, right? I think a mantra for yourself will be helpful. But I think the beginning stage of entering puberty is a really good time to start teaching these skills and modeling these skills, because that is when there's so much distress. But like 12, 13-year-olds are still pretty reachable.
We do have one more question from Sylvia Alamani. You can unmute and ask your question.
Yes, thank you. How can we support an adult who is not being supported by other adults when their child is going through a tough time?
Yeah, that's the hardest part, right? I mean, that's the hardest part of my job, because I can't control anyone, but I can control myself. And that's really when modeling comes into play. And depending on your relationship with the person that you have in mind, mentoring and listening. Just because somebody is not saying everything, it doesn't mean that they don't really value the relationship that they have with you or see you as an anchor. We don't always voice those things to people, but that doesn't mean that they're not important to us. So I would say modeling and mentoring.
All right. Do we have any additional questions for Ms. Shepherd? Ms. Lawrence, you may unmute.
So my question has to do with, okay, I can model all of these wonderful advice that you're giving us, and I'm going to do that. But how do I manage like after the crisis, negative critic that said, or throw away those emotions about I should have been able to get my child before the crisis became a volcano. I should have done X, Y, and Z. How do I manage after the crisis to not have my own personal parent crisis, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question too. And it's not easy, right? It's not. If there were a way to make this easy, then I would be out of a job and I would be glad to have that happen. I think developing your own mantra of self-forgiveness, right? Having a child who's neurodivergent is extremely difficult, and there's no way to stop things from going wrong sometimes. That's par for the course. There's going to be tough days, and there's going to be tough days for anyone who exists on this earth, right? I mean, we all have tough days. And as parents, we can only do our best, right? We have to forgive ourselves for being imperfect.
Okay.
And I'll add, with the forgiveness, my uncle used to say, if you're going to beat yourself up, use a feather, not a brick. Be kind to yourself and give grace to yourself, because it is hard. It is a challenge. And that's why we're here to support you, so that you know you have community and that you have a village and you're not alone. And, we are all going through it too. It's not just in your home. I promise you, we can all make things look, beautiful and great, but we are all at home going through something different and supporting our children. So we got your back. And if you ever need to talk to somebody, you can always call CCD 75 or email us and let us know how we can further stand in the gap to support you with whatever you may have going on. Let me double check. I think we have one more message. Miss Kizzy DeBeek.
Yes. Hi, good evening, everybody. So my son is 7 and he is autistic, and he has tantrums and it could go for hours. He does not understand if I tell him, okay, if I take away his device and I tell him, okay, you're gonna get it back in like 3 hours, and I give him a time, he would keep asking for it. And he will go in a total spiral. I try to explain things to him. I try to let him know that his time is about to be up and it's going to be taken away for, let's say, about 3-4 hours. But some days are okay. He's okay with it. But some days it's really bad. He's running, he's screaming, he's throwing things, he's breaking stuff. How can I get him to not get to that level?
Mm-hmm. And this is a lot of the people that my program supports. They have these really long, we call them crises. And sometimes it's surrounding, especially with the kids, it's often surrounding devices. There's no one size fits all answer to this question. I don't know your son. But one of the strategies that we usually would suggest for families to start with is to have a schedule where he uses his device for the same exact time every day, from this time to this time. And I know that, living at home, things come up and we can't do an exact schedule, but just try your best and have it on the wall, the schedule time. And depending on his reading comprehension and where his strengths are, you might have that be pictures, and you might have it be words, right? My recommendation sometimes is, instead of just listing the time, have a picture of your clock with those times to make it really, really concrete. And then give those 30-minute and 15-minute warnings. But when you have autism, we all need routine and love routine, but when you have autism, you really need routine and love routine. And so, is he going to be different if you do this for 7 days? Maybe not, but over time, it will decrease those frustrations.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up question? Okay. If not, we see the Miss Keon, I see that you asked about questions about organizations that help with drawing. If you could email the council, we definitely can send those resources out to you. D75council@schools.nyc.org. I've also placed Ms. Shepherd's information in the chat for anyone that may need to reach out to her for further assistance. Checking back in with the interpretation lines, do we have any questions in Spanish or Mandarin?
No questions in the Spanish line.
No question from the Mandarin line.
I'm sorry. I have a
Yes.
quick question.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I mean, that we try not to let them get to that point. A lot of times I might not be in the room and he escalates. It might be, like that, due to a device or something. And it's usually with his sibling. And I'll hear it and I'll come running, but he's already in the throes. A lot of times what I'll try to, sometimes I put up my hands out, calm down, and I get hit. Or, how do I, so that he doesn't hurt himself, because then he'll, he starts to engage in self-injurious behavior. And I don't like to see that. It hurts me to see him bang his head, or he just, with his hand really hard. I don't know if, he's doing damage. How do I kind of de-escalate that when it's that severe without hurting myself, or, making sure, because I've gotten hit a couple of times. He's getting big now, he's 18.
Mhm.
And it can be dangerous, and most people will flee. But I, always show him, love. I'm here for you. But I'm getting older, and I'm afraid that, it could be dangerous in a few years.
Yeah. I hear you. Again, this is a lot of the situations that we see in my program. You're right. You can't always prevent it, right? And I think that that's that radical acceptance piece, that if you have a child with autism, they're going to have these moments. It's just part of autism. So if it gets to that point, what do we do? Again, there's no one size fits all, but my generalized recommendation for people is to decrease the stimuli in the room. So
Okay.
that means don't talk much. Turn off the lights. If there's any sound going on in the room, turn that down or off. Sometimes you from a safe distance, because I don't want you to get hurt, and it, that's not safe. But using a fan to cool him down. And sometimes you just have to get through it. If it's really, really severe, sometimes talking to a mental health counselor about a more individualized approach to how to help him might be beneficial.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll also say, Mr. Montalvo, you'll be Montalvo, excuse me, I'm messing your name up. We'll recognize you next. I want to let the parents know, on our outreach, we have been recently having some workshops, and Chelsea did give us a presentation about New York Start, where you guys can watch that and understand what that program is that helps behaviorally as well. And I believe it's no age limit from top to bottom, so you can be supported even in the older ages as our children age.
Yeah.
Additionally, we added on the, I can't remember the date because I have too many things going on in my head, but 988 and the NYPD co-response team did a workshop with us. That is the link that I've placed into the chat. And there are a lot of services that you can get, and that you can get in touch with counselors and different resources and have people come into your home, especially like if your child is hitting. My son is 18 and he's done the same thing as well. So I completely understand where you're coming from, and maybe the fear of, if I call or if he does something to somebody, what happens? And that's what really becomes important, where you learn your community officers and people so that they know your child, because generally you're in your own neighborhood or your own area. And so it's important for us to make these connections, because they can help us out when we are in crisis, because that's what they're there to do, to serve. So if you guys haven't watched the NYPD 988 code response team presentation, that is available. And on August 29th, we will be having a mental health crisis planning workshop for those of us who do not have a plan when crisis happens, so that you can have something to support you in the middle of that. Mr. Lewis, you now have the floor.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. I'm just saying I'm grateful to hear all this, because a lot of what Chelsea, what you've mentioned, are things that I'm applying to myself first and foremost, because you're right. One of the better ways to show your kids is to actually do it yourself. So yeah, you are on target on what you mentioned, and I appreciate it. I feel a little better. I have 2 children with autism. My younger one was in a moment of crisis, and she popped me in the nose. In that moment, I understood why some animals eat their young. So, and I had to take a deep breath and tell her very strongly, no, and calm down, because I didn't want to make the situation worse. And it, just to de-escalate from there. The rest of the day, I had a sinus headache, but that's the worst of it. I come out of it with a sinus headache, but I didn't make the situation worse. And for me, that's a victory. That's a way forward. And these are things that I continue learning and doing myself. And also being honest with, I have my older one. He's going to be 13 in October, and he understands things a little more than my younger one does, who just turned 8 last week. And I tell him that sometimes I mess up, and I have to apologize. I'm not going to hide from what I've done. I'm going to do my best to not do it again. And if I do it again, I'm doing the best. Keep doing it. So you're right. Repetition. And also another thing you mentioned, grace, very important. Being kind to yourselves, first and foremost, and being not judgmental. Because if you're a decent parent and you snap, it's not because you're a horrible person. It's because you're a parent who's frustrated. And sometimes we reach our limits. And that's why I'm here. I like what's been helping me is reaching out to people who know more than I do to help me through these things. So again, thanks very much for doing this evening.
Thank you. We're always so glad to hear that other people in our village are feeling supported, because when we walk through the council, it's like, what do we need? We're still parents, as well. So we're also working on a parent support group, because we have a lot of our parents that feel isolated, and that probably even trumps and impacts everything even more when you're going through crisis, when you feel like you're going through it alone and you have no outlet. So we're going to make sure that we are starting that in September. So if you do want to continue these conversations and continue the support where you are with people, like-minded people who are going through the same things, in a judgment-free, space, please do sign up with our council, D75 Council at schools.nyc.gov. Is there a list or suggestion of mental health counselors who are trained in helping parents of children and adults with developmental disabilities and other conditions? If you email the council, I can pull one together for you. I don't mind doing that. I know there's a lot of different spaces that are kind of separated out, but if you email the council, I definitely will pull up some counselors and the different agencies that do help with the children. And also we have Chelsea here. If you can go through, if you have waiver, right, Chelsea? You have to have the waiver to be able to go through.
Yes, you have to be waiver enrolled.
Okay, so if you have the waiver, there's several different resources that are available to you. I will definitely make sure to get that list to you. Thank you for coming, Lupe. Thank you guys for coming tonight, the people that are leaving the chat. Checking in with interpretation one more time. Do we have any questions from any parents?
No questions in the Spanish line. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any follow-up questions from our parents that are here tonight in the chat, or you can unmute if you do have a question? If not, I want to say thank you guys for coming, because, you know, time is limited. So we want to thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for being able to stand in support with everyone else. Thank you, Chelsea. You are just a jewel, and we appreciate the information and the knowledge that you give. We will make sure to send out the deck, the PDF that she presented, to everyone that is in attendance tonight. If you do need any further support from the council, as I stated before, D75 Council at schools.nyc.gov. And our next council meeting is at 6 p.m. on August 14th. And you guys may register for that at ccd75.org. And we will be hopeful to see you there. So I will go ahead and release the interpreters at 7:14 p.m. And I will say thank you so much again, Chelsea, and thank you to the parents and other people that are here tonight. You guys have a safe night, get some rest, and try some of that relaxing if you can.
Thank you so
Alrighty,
much,
thank you.
everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Have a good
Great
night.
night.